Okay, so year 13, I'm going to talk you through a short film now about how exactly do I analyse form and structure. Um, Important in the context of the AQA exam in that it's assessment objective 2. This, the first part of it, exploration and analysis of key forms of form and structure, key features of form and structure, with a perceptive evaluation of how they shape meanings. What is their function? How do they work as techniques? And crucially, how do they support you in answering the question that you've set yourself? Notice that it's separated form and structure from language. So language being where you'd engage in things like the words, in metaphor, in imagery, in simile, in particular word choices. Um, Form and structure is much more about the mechanics, how the poem is built. It's got a bit of a bad reputation, I think. People think it's kind of dull. It is absolutely not dull. It is the most interesting, most fascinating part of studying poetry in many ways. It's what makes poetry poetic. It's what makes poetry special and unique. And unless you understand this stuff, unless you think about form and structure, you're not really engaging with poetry at all. I don't think you're not engaging. You can only engage with it on a very surface level if you're just thinking about the words. Think about the texture of the poem. How is it put together? Anyway, things that you might consider are issues such as the order that the structure takes place. What order are ideas presented in, and why is that important? So, if we're thinking about Tony Harrison and Them and Us, why does he, for example, leave us with the idea that the Times changed his name from Tony to Anthony? Why have we had this situation in the poem where you get the rather kind of bleak opening section of the teacher talking to him about the teacher telling him off at school for his accent. Then you get this triumphant building enthusiasm of Harrison finding his voice in the second stanza, but then it's undercut by this reference to the Times making him Anthony when that's not his name, it's not his identity. Why does it happen in that order? The fact that we're left with this impression of failure is important. Okay, so order is important for form and structure. Genre may be important. What type of poem is it? Is it a sonnet? Is it similar to an ode? Is it similar to a ballad? What type of poem is it, and why is that important? Metre, rhythm, rhyme, fascinating areas for you to understand and look at. How do these things help to carry meaning? And how do they help to carry meanings which help you which help you answer your question? Openings and endings can be a fertile source and a useful source for form and structure, things to look at. Where and how is pace altered? How does the poet control pace in the poem? And how is it set out on the page? What does it look like on the page? I suppose to understand these things, it's helpful to look at an example. So if we think about Duffy here, this wonderful poem Havisham, which structurally is very interesting. How? Okay, so spinster, I stink and remember. We're in second stanza here. Whole days in bed, calling no at the wall. The dress yellowing, trembling if I open the wardrobe, the slued mirror, full length her myself. Who did this to me? Well, what's going on structurally? When you look at it on the page, it looks like it's set out in fairly regular lines of fairly regular stanzas of 4 line each. It looks like a ballad, really, in a way. But when you go into the detail, it's all over the place. You've got these short sentences here. Spinster, I stink and remember. These short, abrupt sentences joined with the assonants stink and spinster, and the sibilants really spitting out the vitriol and bitterness here. But then you get this outpouring, don't you? Whole days in bed, all the way down to who did this to me. Enjambment, giving us a sense of her sort of disorderly mind, of Havisham's, as if these emotions, these thoughts and ideas are just spilling out of her uncontrollably. They sort of break the form of the poem. They go, it's like as if the form of the poem, which is set out, is not sufficient to control the extent of her distress, even to the extent that the enjambment, which is unusual, runs over stanzas. It runs between 2 stanzas. So it bridges this stanza to this. It's clearly a stanza break. There's a gap in between. But Duffy seems to suggest that her distress is such that the poetic form isn't capable of of keeping it orderly, I suppose. So loads and loads and loads of stuff here. This you can get further looking at the lines. The dress yellowing, trembling if I open the wardrobe. The listing here, mirror, full length, her, myself. Who did this to me? The way that the line becomes quite staccato, it becomes broken up by all these commas, and then when she dreams, some nights better, the lost body over me. You get this. She allows the lines to kind of develop more fully. My fluent tongue in its mouth, in its ear. And we'll stop there. But yeah, this sense that the passion that she feels in the dream, the tenderness, is reflected in a more flowing line there. Absolutely fascinating stuff. And if you want to know about poetry and learn to really love poetry, learn about this stuff. So to sum up, remembering two things that are important to remember: consider how form and structure carry meaning. It's no good just spotting them. It's no good saying, oh, it's iambic pentameter, if we're not going on to consider what meaning that carries. Why is that important? What impression does it create? And beyond that, writing about meanings which are relevant to your task. Okay, so it's no good writing about, I don't know, how the enjambment displays Havisham's fragile or emotional state if your title isn't focusing you in that direction. Okay, so make sure you write about meanings which are relevant to your task. And finally, use the technical terminology, caesura, enjambment. If you can't, iambic pentameter, trochees, iambs. If you can't remember that stuff, which we have covered, so you should, but if you can't, look it up. If you Google poetic meter, you'll find loads of stuff. It's absolutely the best thing to get independently engaged with. And the more you learn about it, the more confident you feel, the more interesting it will become, I promise.